Now, currently within our application, if we were to select or click on one of our grid items with the city, it doesn't do anything. So what we want to do here is if we click on the city, we want to navigate to a new page or route with all of the weather information for that particular city. Okay, so let's begin to set that up. So what we want to do is inside of our views folder here, we want to create a new file. This is going to be called weather, and then we'll add the .view. And inside of this component, we want to just start with a basic view template here. And for now, I'm just going to generate an H4 here and say weather. Now, to actually see this, we need to add some styling, because currently with how it is, when we navigate to this view, the navigation will be covering this. So we can say padding top, and we can set this to, let's just do 100 pixels. All right. So in order to navigate to this route, we need to actually create that. So if we head over to our router folder and into the index.js, we can do that. So to start, we need to import this component, just as we did the add city here. So we gave this a name of weather. So we will replace that. And then let's go ahead and add it right here as well for our actual location of the file. Now, next up, we want to actually create this route. So inside of our const of routes here, we have an array, and I'm just going to duplicate the one we have for add city. So for the path or the URL for this route, we want to say weather, and now we're going to pass it a param for the specific city that we want to navigate to. So how we create a param in our route is we say colon and we give it a name. So in our case, we're going to be calling this param city. Now for the name of this, we want to call it weather. And for the component it's looking at, we want to also change this to weather. All right, so now if we head over to our project here, and we were to say /weather, and we define a name here, it can be anything right now, so we'll just say Warren. Yeah, that'll work. You can see now that we will see this component of weather here in our view, and we still have our navigation, so that's all working properly. Now, what we want to do, like I mentioned earlier, is if we click on one of these grid items, we want it to take us to that route. So let's begin to set that up. Now, inside of our city component, we want to pass a click on the div with the class of city, and we want to give this a name, or we want to call the function go to weather. Okay. Now inside of our methods here, we'll go ahead and open this up. So go to weather. Now, one thing we're going to do, because we have added the ability to edit these cities by clicking on the edit icon. Now, if someone is currently editing one and they click on the delete button, it'll go ahead and delete it, but it'll also take them to that view. So what we want to say is if someone clicks on this item here, but they click on this delete icon, we don't want to do anything. So what we can say is inside of this function, we're going to pass the event, and we're going to give that a value of e. So what we're going to say, if e.target is equal to this .refs, and the ref we want to associate with is right here on this icon, which we gave it a value of edit. So we can say if e.target is equal to this .refs.edit, then we do not want to do anything. Now, if it doesn't, we want to then go ahead and navigate to our new route. Now, how we navigate to a new route inside of this function is we can say this dot $router, and then we want to perform a push. Now, inside of this push, it accepts a few arguments. Now, this is going to be inside of an object. Now, the first one is the name of the component that we want to navigate to, which we gave it a name of weather. Now, what we want to do is we're going to put a comma here, and now we want to set the param of the current route. So as you can see here in our index.js, we gave it the value of city. So how we actually set this parameter in the route is we say params, and this is going to be an object, and the name we gave it was city, and we want to set this city param to the value of this .city.city. Okay, so now if we were to head over to our application here, and we're going to get a console error. I think if we save it now, let's see, it looks like I may have typed in the actual function wrong, so it's actually capitalized that, and that should resolve that error. Okay, so we are all set there. So now if we click on, for example, Detroit, it should navigate us to the URL of weather/Detroit. And if we click on Boston, it'll go ahead and do the same. So now we have set up the ability for us to click on one of our grid items and navigate to that new route. Now that we have the ability to generate a new route when we're clicking on each one of our cities, let's begin to build out this component. Now, the first thing we're going to be working on is actually reaching out to a new weather or a new OpenWeatherMap API and getting the additional information we need to build out this component, okay? So if we head over to the OpenWeatherMap website, we're going to be utilizing the OneCall API, okay? Now, currently, we're only using the current weather data. Now, for the rest of this actual application and this view, we're going to need access to the hourly forecast and also the daily forecast. All right. Now, how we make this API call is by providing it a latitude and longitude values. Now, in the current weather API, we can actually pass it a city name, where in the OneCall API, we cannot. But luckily, how I went ahead and designed this, we actually get the latitude and longitude from this API, which we're going to take that information we received here and use it in this OneCall API. Okay, so we're going to reach out to our Firestore collection, and for whatever view we are in, based on the URL here, we're going to reach out to our Firestore collection and return all the data we have, including the current weather. And inside of that current weather object, we actually have access to the latitude and longitude, which will then pass in this API call right here. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Now, the first thing we're going to do is give this component a name. We're going to say weather. And then we want to also pass some data here. So we want to return this, and the 3 data values I want to create is one for forecast, which we're going to store all the forecast information in. And we'll set this equal to null. And then we want to also create one for current weather. Set that to null. And then also I want to create one called loading. So when the actual API is making the call, there will be a 3 or 4 second gap that we won't have the information. So what we're going to do is we're going to display a spinner icon until that data has been received. I think that'll make for a way better user experience instead of just looking at a white screen. Okay, so that's what this value is going to be used for, and we'll get into that more when we start doing the markup for this section. Now, what I want to do is actually create the API call, because we're going to be needing that data to build out the majority of this application. So I thought might as well go ahead and just get that done right off the bat so we can populate our application much easier. So what I want to do is actually import Axios, because we're going to be needing this. So we're going to say from Axios, and then I also want to import our database from our Firebase init file. And Firebase init. All right. Now, one other thing we're going to need to do is we need to get access to our API key. So I want to create a props here, and we want to accept the value of, let's see, API key. Now, currently we aren't binding that to the router view in our app.view here. So let's go ahead and do that really quick, because we can't actually access that unless we are binding it. So we'll go ahead and do this, and now we should have access, or we will have access, to use this value of the API key inside of our weather component. Okay, now we haven't created our methods yet, so let's go ahead and do that. Now the function we're going to be creating here is going to be called getWeather. Pretty simple. Now what we want to do here is, like I said, we want to reach out to our Firestore collection for the current city view we're in based on the actual URL up here. So right now we have no reference to what current city we're in. So what we can actually use is the route parameter we passed in through, let's see here, our router. You can see we're giving this a param of city, and then we are defining that param here in the city component. So what we can do is we're going to start by referencing our collection of cities. Let's go ahead and put that there. Now we're going to be using the where method again to go ahead and give us the result we want based on the city field. So we're going to pass the city, and we're going to pass it the equals operator. And then we want to then somehow define what city we want to search for. So we can actually use the value inside of our URL right now by using some interpolation here. And we can use our brackets, and we can actually money sign brackets. We can say this money sign route dot params. And then the ID or the value that it is currently named is city. So we can say .city, because as you can see here, we gave this the parameter value of city. All right. So this will go ahead and search our Firestore collection for the current city field that's equal to the current param that we have in our URL that is under city. All right. So now we want to go ahead and run the get method here, and I'll save that to reformat it. Now, when we go ahead and do this, we then want to perform a .then method, if I can speak. And then we're going to want to pass this the parameter of docs. And then we're going to say docs.forEach. And we want to pass as the value of doc, and then open up our arrow function here. And here is where we're going to start assigning data from the actual Firestore collection to a few of our data values here in the data. So the first one we want to assign is this .current weather is going to be equal to the doc.data.current weather. All right. Now, once we have this, well, this doesn't really make a difference whether we have this assigned to the value or not, but the next thing we want to do is actually reach out to our OpenWeatherMap API and now get that information we need for the rest of the component here. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that in. So we're going to be saying here axios.get, and here is the URL. And you can see here we're just going to be using the Firestore collection of doc.data.current weather. And inside of that current weather, we have the .cord, and then we have the .lat, and the same thing for the longitude right here. Okay, and then we're also using our API key. Now, I also modified this to exclude the current, since we already have the current weather information. We don't need to get that. I'm also excluding the minutely, which is the minute, and also the alerts, because we're not going to be using that. And we have set the units to imperial like we have in our other API call on the app.view. Okay, so once we have this, we then want to then run a then method. Now in here we want to pass res as our parameter, and we want to say this dot forecast is equal to the result dot data. Okay. Now what we also want to do after this is done is then we want to tack on another then method here, and we want to say let me see here, I forgot that right there, and then we want to say this dot loading is equal to false. Okay, because at this point in time we have received all the information we need, so we can go ahead and set this value to false, which will then make the condition up here we're going to create for the spinner be false, and then display all the data. Okay, now to go ahead and see this working, we can simply just go ahead and log the results to the console. So let's say console.log, and we'll say this dot forecast, and I'll just go ahead and copy this down. And we'll also log out to the console this dot current weather. Okay, so once we head over to our application, we should see now that when we select a city, we should be getting this information for each one of our cities. So let's head over to our application here. Let's refresh it, and let's just back out here. So if we click on Warren, you should see that we're not getting anything, and that is simply because we have created the function, but we have not actually initialized it in our created lifecycle hook. So let's go ahead and do that. And then we should be able to see that. So we'll say get weather And there we go. So now if we head back over here, you should see we're now getting two return values here. One's going to be our current weather. So the first one's going to actually be the forecast. You can see we have the daily, the hourly, which is an array. And then inside the array, we have, I believe, 8 different responses. And then you can see here we have all this information for each day. And then we also have the hourly, which is up to, I believe, 48 hours. So we have 48 different responses here. Now, this will work for each city we go into, and the data will all be different. So if we head over to Boston, you can see if I head over to the, let's see, do I have the city name in here? I don't, but I can assure you that this is all different data. And once we start to populate our application, you will go ahead and see that.